50 past the hour. Let's go to Vaughn Hilliard. What's going on in the Senate?
Tulsi Gabbard has officially been confirmed as the next director of national intelligence for this Trump administration by a 52-48 vote. Jose, Republican majority here backing her confirmation and ultimately putting her atop the U.S. intelligence agencies. The Mitch McConnell, ultimately the only Republican to vote against her nomination. This is the second nominee of Donald Trump's in which Mitch McConnell has voted no, but notably Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, who were skeptical of her nomination, ultimately voted to confirm her. The next nomination up is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Democrats are going to begin to take the Senate floor this afternoon through the night to denounce his nomination in what we expect to be a unanimous opposition among all Democratic senators tomorrow morning when his vote is ultimately taken up for his confirmation around the 7 a.m. Eastern hour time. Now, the question with Vice President Vance, who could be a tiebreaker vote for that nomination, he is overseas presently and will be tomorrow here. And at this point in time, there are still some Republican question marks for his nomination. Mitch McConnell, one of those. Senator Curtis out of Utah. Lisa Murkowski as well. And if 3 Republicans were to vote against him, this would put his nomination in an ultimate bind. So there is still serious questions about his nomination here over the course of the next 16 hours or so, Jose. But for Donald Trump, another victory in terms of filling his cabinet with people who were perhaps controversial, but individuals who he believes loyalists who will go in and effectively reconfigure these agencies to his desires. Tulsi Gabbard, the latest in the ranks to be confirmed by this United States Senate.
And just to reconfirm with you, Vaughn, so RFK Jr., it looks like the timing for that is when, you said?
7 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. They have to let a certain amount of time go by to allow the debate to proceed here. And that is where Democrats have said, much like what we saw them do with the nomination of Russ Vought to be the OMB director, where senators switched off positions, where they spoke from the Senate floor. We expect that to take place here through the night ahead of what is going to be an early morning here up on Capitol Hill for the senators to take up his vote for that confirmation, which we expect to be very close.
Vaughn Hilliard, I thank you very much, my friend. Really appreciate it. And with us now, Rick Stengel, former Undersecretary of State for Public Affairs and Diplomacy under President Obama. He's an MSNBC political analyst. And Rick, it's always a pleasure to see you. I haven't had the privilege of seeing you in some time, but I am very fortunate to be able to have you now. Let's just go right now with the DNI vote. It was interesting that McConnell was the only Republican that voted against it. And on the Democratic side, it was down the line, not one defection.
Yes. Jose, as you know, this job is a relatively recent job. It was only created after 9/11 when people saw all the different silos of information of these 18 intelligence services that weren't coordinated. So they decided, let's try to coordinate them and create someone at the top of that. That's the job she was just confirmed for. It's a very important job. It's the person who actually decides what the president sees in the daily brief every morning and what's important of that stuff that comes in there. I think part of the reason that people voted against her is she's not an experienced intelligence official. She doesn't understand or know those other agencies, which I think is pretty important when you're trying to coordinate them. Ultimately, the job of the DNI is a judgment call. And her judgment has not been flawless. The fact that she's repeated lots of memes and ideas from Russian disinformation and Russian propaganda is something that I'm sure makes people in the intelligence community concerned.
And so, Rick, I want to, using your experience for so many things, including, negotiations and things, I've just been thinking about what you see in what we've been seeing with President Trump recently, talking about what the United States should be doing with Gaza. I mean, the King of Jordan was there yesterday. And, when the president was asked what authority the United States would have to take over an entire area and displace 2 million people, he said U.S. authority. What do you see in that? Is it a tactic or is it a policy?
My best possible description of it is that it's bizarre, one of the more bizarre proposals of a president of the United States in American history. I mean, remember, he ran for office saying, let's get out of these endless wars in the Middle East. And now he wants to possibly do a real estate deal that would be one of the biggest ones in history. It's just, It's not something I think the American people want. It's not something that he campaigned on. And as you mentioned, it's a violation of every single bedrock principle of international law, that ones that we've pledged to, the Geneva Agreements, the Nuremberg trials after World War II. You can't forcibly displace people from their land. And so he's just treating it somehow as though this is an exception to international law, and it's not. And then, of course, you have millions of people who feel that this is their land, that they've been in since 1948 and were displaced then. There are 130 countries in the UN that recognize the Palestinian state. So it's just bizarre.
And I just keep thinking, I mean, it's almost as though that is such a difficult thing to talk about and to do. I mean, you know, it's certainly not Abraham Accords. It's certainly not Camp David. I mean, there's nothing in this that is, you use the word bizarre, but there's nothing in this that shows any possibility that something like this could happen. I mean, what do you do with 2 million people? What do you say? No, you don't have the right to come back. You do have the right to come back. I mean, possibilities have to exist in order for something to be carried out.
Well, I mean, to use your construction, is this some kind of elaborate bluff? And maybe he's doing it to make what he says about Greenland and Canada seem less bizarre. But it's also completely unproductive on the world stage, because what it does is give license to Vladimir Putin to talk about taking over Ukraine and displacing the Ukrainian people, who he says are not a nation, the way so many people say the Palestinians are not. So it's really a bad precedent.